I would like to say a few things before getting into this. First off, I apologize for the lack of complex editing in this video. I talk about a lot of different games during it, and it would take way too long to get the footage for all of them, and I also personally don't like using other people's footage. And secondly, this video is going to be pretty personal, so if you're not into that sort of thing, feel free to click off. But I would still highly appreciate you staying around, as I do have quite a bit to say, and I'd love if you heard it, and commented down below what you think of my opinions. Thank you. Maybe tell your own stories. I'd love to get a conversation going, but without further ado, Pokémon. Now there is a franchise I have very complex feelings for. What once was a franchise that I didn't care for at all, only for it to then become my favorite in gaming. And finally, back to me not caring about it again. In this video, I plan to go through my bullet point experiences with the series, and explain how it got to this point. It all started at 2013, with Pokémon X and Y. That was around the time I was starting to experiment with more video game franchises. So I got Pokémon X, my first ever Pokémon game. Herein it was the greatest Pokémon game of all time, hoping to be blown away. My first playthrough of Pokémon X and Y is one I have very little memory of. All I can recall is that I barely understood how the combat worked at all, skipped all of the text, yet somehow made it all the way up to the Elite Four, when I promptly quit, as I was just not strong enough to beat them. And frankly, I wasn't really having that much fun. That experience, however, mostly boiled down to the fact that I was very stupid back then, and didn't care for the game enough to give it my attention. Up until that point, I mostly just played platformers, so Pokémon's radically different approach to game design just flat out alienated me. You'd think the story would end there. I checked out Pokémon, didn't like it, and realized I'm just not into JRPGs. But then came the game that changed everything. I know that this is an extremely cliched thing to say nowadays, but Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door shaped me as a person. I absolutely adored everything about it. Part of that had to do with me being a lot older by that point, and in turn, far more patient to learn how games I played work. But it was also due to how incredible of a game The Thousand-Year Door was. It really does deserve its own video, so I won't harp on it for too long. But in short, if you are a Mario fan who wants to get into JRPGs, this is an absolute must-play. After finishing it, I was extremely excited to check out the other Mario RPGs, and I moved on to fall in love with Super Mario RPG, the first 4 Mario and Luigi games, and the first 3 Paper Mario games. However, here's the catch. The Mario RPG started getting really bad around the 2010s. I will hold on to the opinion that Mario and Luigi Dream Team is an underrated gem, but the rest of the catalog ranged from mediocre to absolutely atrocious. So in short, I ran out of Mario RPGs to play, but in hindsight, maybe that was a blessing in a curse, as it forced me to move on and check out other RPGs, and along with that, there were 2 very influential key figures that greatly compelled me to get into Pokémon. First off was Sugar Conroy, a Let's Player I discovered around the time. Going back and watching many of Sugar Conroy's Let's Plays had me extremely entertained. The amount of work and research he put into his videos was simply incredible. And the second one was Psycho. He made content very similar to Sugar's on his Let's Play channel, which is extremely overlooked. He has this far more casual vibe, and watching his videos always gives the feeling of hanging out with a friend, who just so happened to know a lot about video games, and provide very entertaining walkthroughs of them. So yeah, I fell in love with these 2 channels, but they both shared something that I was not very into, and that was Pokémon. Both of these channels had mountains of Pokémon content, and they talked about the series on a regular basis. In a way, I kinda felt left out. So with Psycho starting his Pokémon Crystal Let's Play, I decided that it was finally time to give the series another shot, starting with Pokémon Yellow on the original Game Boy. This time, however, I was a lot more experienced. I had a far better grasp on Pokémon's rules and mechanics. I got a type chart ready, I set up my emulator, and started my playthrough of Pokémon Yellow. And I quit before getting the second badge. Yeah, I should probably explain that. You see, I was having fun, but it was also pretty long and draining, so when I go to Cerulean City, I googled up a walkthrough to see how far in I was, and it kinda disheartened me to see that I was so early on in the game, so much so that I quit. With Psycho playing through Pokémon Crystal, I found myself much more interested in that game, and so I decided to put down Pokémon Yellow and instead commit to Pokémon Crystal. I played through the entirety of it, and absolutely adored it. I didn't get many of the references to the first game, but I fell in so much love with its world I just couldn't care. I was ecstatic to go on and check out the next installment, Pokémon Emerald. Just like the previous games, I played through the entirety of Pokémon Emerald on an emulator, and I am not sure what it was, but Emerald didn't really hit many of the same notes as Crystal did for me. I did enjoy it for sure, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't over the moon in love with it. I just found it to be an enjoyable game, if a bit of a slightly weaker title than Crystal. I also checked out Pokémon Fire Red and Leaf Green, remakes of the original games, as it seemed like a good excuse to revisit and actually finish those first games, and so I did just that. Pokémon Fire Red and Leaf Green were finished fair and square, and just like Emerald, I thought they were pretty good, but Crystal was still my favorite. The next logical destination after that would of course be Pokémon Platinum. However, I ran into a bit of a problem back then, and that was that my laptop was way too weak to emulate the S games, so I actually had to go out and buy physical copies of the 4DS Pokémon games. It cost me a pretty penny for sure, but in due time, I ended up with copies of Pokémon Platinum, Heart Gold, White, and White 2. This was locally back when those games went out for reasonable prices, so I didn't have to break too much bank to get them. I am not sure if it was because I played them on original hardware as opposed to emulation, but I absolutely fell in love with all 4 of these games. Platinum hit so close to home, and is still to this day so nostalgic for me. Heart Gold and Soul Silver took a game I already loved, and somehow managed to make it 1000 times better. Black and White blew me away with their incredible story and visuals, and Black and White 2, at the time, I declare to be my favorite games of all time. They had so much content, so many things to do, such an amazing world, and I legit loved my Pokémon team more than most people I know in real life. After all of that greatness, I was absolutely ecstatic to revisit Pokémon X and Y. Oh man, I'm gonna be able to finally give them another shot. I'm sure I'll get super nostalgic, fall in love, and they will top Black and White 2 and be my new favorite games of all time. I mean, up until that point, every Pokémon game since Platinum was better than the last. There is no way this can stop now, but then I played them, and I was left more disappointed than you could imagine. They didn't hit any of the notes the previous 4 games did for me. It felt like some lifeless cheap imitation of the formula I once adored, with barely any love and passion put into it. Just a bunch of Gen 1 pandering and crappy new gimmicks, along with having barely a sliver of the amount of content Black and White 2 had. I did finish them this time around, but I was left pretty empty as a result. I then moved on to Pokémon Omega Ruby and Pokémon Sun. Sadly, both of these titles also failed to capture what made the DS game so special to me, with Omega Ruby just being a far blender version of Emerald, though I do hold a bit of affection towards Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, because PBG's Alpha Sapphire Nuzlocke might legitimately be my favorite Let's Play of all time. If you haven't yet, check it out ASAP. It is such a fantastic mix of comedic editing and some incredibly intense moments. 10 out of 10 would watch many times again.
Pokémon, Pokémon, Pokémon Graveyard, Pokémon, Pokémon, Pokémon Graveyard. Everyone's sad, it's a Pokémon, Pokémon Graveyard. That's all I got, Jeff. That's all I got. I tried my best.
But then we have Pokémon Sun. I know many people say that Sun and Moon are far better than X and Y, and that they saved the series, but personally, I found them to be just as bad, with forgettable writing, along with even more horrible exclusions of series staples. I honestly just couldn't really bring myself to care about Sun and Moon at all, and that was even more so true for Ultra Sun and Moon, which I didn't even bother finishing. But all of my disappointments and issues with the 3DS games didn't change the fact that I still absolutely adore Gens 1 through 5. I went back and finished Pokémon Yellow, along with playing through all of the games for dozens of hours, having a blast going through them and getting to as close as completing them as I could. It was a magical time. I even watched through the whole stupid anime up to the Sun and Moon arc, and oh boy am I never doing that again. Okay, the Gen 1 arc was fine, 2 was good, 3 was great, 4 was amazing, 5 was awful, 6 was also amazing, 7 was bad, and I haven't watched the Gen 8 anime yet, though from what I've seen of it so far, it does seem like a pretty sizable improvement over Gen 7, so maybe I'll come back to it in the future if I have a bunch of free times and I'm bored out of my mind, who knows. But that brings us into 2018, 1 year after all of this happened. That was when rumors started popping up that Game Freak was going to remake Pokémon Yellow on the Nintendo Switch, featuring Pikachu and Eevee as the mascots. When I first heard of those rumors, I was praying for them to not be real. One of my least favorite things about the newer games is how much they pander to the Gen 1 fans. I found it incredibly obnoxious and irritating. The previous games always showed an equal amount of love to the entire series, with each Gen's new Pokémon always getting the most spotlight. But from Gen 6 onward, it seemed like Gen 1 Pokémon were getting more attention than the newer Pokémon, with Gens 2 through 5 barely getting any recognition whatsoever, as if they were some disaster and the series has never been good since Gen 2. This has been locally getting a lot better recently, but it was really bad during Gen 6 and 7. And what do you know? Those rumors were indeed true. We did get remakes of Pokémon Yellow, but they didn't have any of the great new content from Fire Red and Leaf Green, instead just stripping away a bunch of features and only having the original 151 Pokémon, along with a few variations of them. Oh, and also Melton, I guess. I really didn't care. But even with Let's Go being yet another disappointment, I still had a little bit of hope. I loved Gens 1 through 5 so much, and I believed that the franchise could get back on its feet, and return to being the king of RPGs. But anyways, then Sword and Shield happened. When Sword and Shield initially got revealed, I was actually pretty optimistic. They seemed to be going away from a lot of the stuff I hated about the 3DS games, and trying to move the series onwards. But then, it happened. A day any Pokémon fan knows all too well. June 11th, 2019. The day of reckoning. When Game Freak officially announced that Pokémon Sword and Shield won't have every Pokémon up to Gen 8. As many of them just straight up won't be programmed into the game at all. This just broke me. All of the new games were just removing features left and right, but with Gen 8 only having a very limited amount of Pokémon, when up until that point, every game had all Pokémon up to its point in it, was just the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I gave up on modern Pokémon, and now you could argue that I could still always go back to the games I loved. But the issue with that is that ever since the National Dex controversy, the Pokémon series and fanbase have lost almost any form of credibility. What was once a great community I loved hanging out with and enjoyed the content of, had turned into an absolute mess of toxic waste dump, with people just not respecting others at all. They were either harassing devs, or harassing people who had even the littlest bit of bad things to say about the new games. I was just tired of it all. Don't get me wrong, there are some incredible Pokémon fans out there. I am not trying to insult anyone just because they are a part of a specific group, but all of this toxicity and hate almost ruined any amount of love I had towards anything Pokémon related, and everyone I knew was quick to call the Pokémon fanbase the most toxic in all of gaming, which was extremely disheartening. Talking about Pokémon just always made me sad. All of the magic just evaporated with one single event that tore the whole community in two. And what didn't help is that around that time, I discovered what would become my new favorite video game franchise. Final Fantasy completely changed what I believe JRPGs, heck, what video games could be. I loved the style, gameplay, combat, stories, characters. Those games took over my life for the longest time. More specifically the first 10 games minus 2 and 14. But the rest of the series tended to be a little spotty for my experience. However, that didn't change the fact that when I looked at Pokémon, all I could do was compare it to Final Fantasy. And it just made Pokémon look even more the worse. Almost all of my affection was gone. I still loved those older games, but what I was left with was a strong bias against them, and everything to do with them, that I didn't even care about them anymore. I still went on saying that I love Gens 1 through 5, but it has been a very long time since I even thought about touching them. But I think it's about time to change that. I am planning on going back, forgetting any previous harbored bias, and look at the entire Pokémon series with a fresh perspective. I will be completing as much as I possibly could in any of the games, and even look at every single one of the spin-off games. I have never even touched most of them, even though I know they get very high praise. Now don't get me wrong, I don't plan to look at all of these games in a row, god no, that would be way too much. But I am willing to make this a long-term goal of mine, because I truly want, and know, I can fall in love with Pokémon all over again, and maybe even get newfound appreciation towards the newer games in the coming years, who knows. But what I do know is that this journey will start with my next video, an in-depth analysis of Pokémon Red, Blue, and Yellow. It's gonna be a big project, so it might take some time, but I am willing to fully commit to this. Hope you look forward to it, and thank you so much for watching this very personal video. I will hopefully see you all later. Peace. As I asked earlier, what are some of your personal experiences with Pokémon? Even if your opinions are the exact opposite of mine, I will fully respect them no matter what. Let's keep this as non-toxic as possible. But anyways, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I hope you look forward to Pokémon Red, Blue and Yellow.